The resort lobby was roaring with laughter, until a quiet plea in broken English was mocked into silence. An old Japanese man clutched his reservation slip as the manager sneered, "Sir, this place is far too expensive for you." Humiliated, he backed away, eyes shining with the kind of hurt no one noticed or cared to. Just then, a waitress stepped out from behind the crowd and whispered a single Japanese greeting that froze the entire room. None of them knew it yet, but they had just insulted the billionaire who secretly owned every hotel they worked for. Kenji Morita stood in the middle of the crowded lobby and felt invisible. Not the kind of invisible he'd paid for all these years. The careful, chosen privacy of a man who could buy silence and discretion. This was different. This was the invisibility of being dismissed, of being looked through like he wasn't worth the effort of focusing. His worn leather suitcase sat beside his feet, scuffed from years of travel, and his simple gray jacket hung loose on his shoulders. He looked exactly like what he'd intended, an ordinary older man on vacation. But he hadn't expected it to feel like this. The Grand Summit Resort rose around him like a cathedral of wealth, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers and windows that framed the mountains like expensive paintings. Everywhere he looked, staff members moved with practiced smiles, greeting guests who arrived in designer clothes and confident voices. A woman in a fur coat, in September, was being escorted to the front desk by two bellhops fighting over her luggage. A man in a tailored suit snapped his fingers, and a concierge appeared at his elbow like magic. The air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers, and beneath it all, the faint scent of judgment. Kenji had been standing in line for 20 minutes. The line had been 6 people long when he arrived. Now it was 3 people long, but he was still standing in the same spot, because every time he got close to the desk, someone new would arrive and the staff would wave them forward. A couple in matching tennis whites. A family with shopping bags from stores Kenji owned stock in. A businessman who didn't even have luggage, just a phone pressed to his ear and an expression that said the world owed him speed. Each time, Kenji stepped back. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself this was exactly why he'd come here, to see how his company's properties treated people when they thought no one important was watching. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things, and right now what he felt was small. "Excuse me," he said quietly to a passing staff member, a young man in a crisp uniform with a name tag that said, Dylan. His English was careful, each word placed like a stone across a stream. "I have reservation. I wait long time." Dylan glanced at him, then past him, scanning the lobby for someone more important. "You'll have to wait your turn, sir," he said, already moving away. The word, sir, sounded like an afterthought, something he'd been trained to say but didn't mean. Kenji nodded and stayed where he was. His feet hurt. He'd been traveling for 18 hours, Tokyo to San Francisco to Denver to here, each flight another layer of distance between him and the life that had collapsed around him 3 weeks ago. His nephew. His own blood. The boy he'd mentored and trusted and prepared to take over the company. And all the while, that boy had been moving pieces on a board Kenji hadn't known existed, making deals behind his back, positioning himself to push Kenji out. The betrayal had been clean and surgical and completely legal. It had also been devastating. So Kenji had done something he hadn't done in 30 years. He'd left. No security detail. No assistant. No one who would look at him and see dollar signs or power or opportunity. Just an old man with a suitcase and a reservation made under a name no one would recognize. The line moved forward. Kenji moved with it. 2 people ahead of him now. He could see the front desk, where a woman with perfect makeup and an even more perfect smile was typing on a computer. She looked up, caught his eye for a fraction of a second, and looked away again. Not worth her time. Behind him, he heard laughter. A group of guests, 3 men in golf clothes, carrying drinks from the bar, had gathered near the lobby entrance, looking at something on a phone. One of them glanced over at Kenji and said something too quiet to hear. The others laughed louder. Kenji didn't turn around. He'd learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do was acknowledge mockery. It only encouraged them. "Next," called the woman at the desk. The person ahead of Kenji moved forward. "One more. Just one more," and then he could check in and go upstairs and lock himself in a room where no one could see him. He was so tired. The kind of tired that lived in his bones and made every small interaction feel like climbing stairs. Next, Kenji stepped forward. The woman at the desk looked at him, and her smile dimmed like someone had turned down a dial. "Name?" she asked, her tone flat. "Morita," Kenji said, setting his suitcase down carefully. "Kenji Morita. I have reservation. Spell the last name." He did. She typed, frowning at her screen. The frown deepened. "I don't see anything," she said. "Are you sure you have a reservation here?" "Yes. I make reservation 3 weeks ago." He reached for his jacket pocket, trying to remember where he'd put the confirmation email. His phone? His wallet? Everything felt scrambled in his head, exhaustion mixing with embarrassment. "Sir, if you don't have a confirmation number, I can't help you." She was already looking past him, toward the next person in line. "Maybe you have the wrong hotel?" "No, is correct hotel. I'm sure. Please, can you check?" "I already checked." Her voice had gone sharp now, impatient. "We have nothing under that name. Now please step aside so I can help the next guest." Step aside. Like he was blocking traffic. Like he was some kind of obstacle. Kenji felt heat crawl up his neck, that particular shame that came from being dismissed in public, from being treated like you were too stupid to understand what was happening. His English was good, not perfect, but good enough. He knew what she was really saying. She was saying, "You don't belong here." "Please," he said again, hating how small his voice sounded. "I have reservation. Maybe different name. I can explain." "Sir." A new voice, sharp and male. Kenji looked up and saw a man in a manager's jacket striding toward the desk, his expression all business and no warmth. "Is there a problem here?" "This gentleman doesn't have a reservation," the desk woman said, her tone suggesting the word gentleman was being generous. The manager looked Kenji up and down. The worn jacket, the old suitcase, the gray hair that needed cutting, and something closed in his face. "Sir, this is a luxury resort. If you're looking for budget accommodations, there are several motels about 15 miles down the mountain road." He said it loud enough that nearby guests turned to look. The message was clear: you can't afford this place. Something broke inside Kenji then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack, like ice splitting on a frozen lake. He'd built an empire. He employed 40,000 people across 6 countries. He'd donated more money to charity in the last year than this entire resort probably made in profit. And right now, none of it mattered, because these people looked at him and saw nothing worth their time. He was about to speak, to say what he didn't know, when a voice cut through the lobby noise like a bell. "Sumimasen." The word was Japanese. "Excuse me," but it was more than that. It was the polite form, the respectful version, spoken with perfect Tokyo pronunciation. Kenji's head turned so fast his neck cracked. A young woman was walking toward him from the cafe area, wearing a simple black uniform with an apron, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from too many hours on your feet, but her eyes were kind. And she was looking directly at Kenji. She stopped a few feet away and bowed slightly, a small, respectful gesture that hit Kenji like a punch to the chest. Then she spoke again, and this time it wasn't one word. It was a full sentence, fluent and natural and impossibly unexpected. "Sir, may I help you?" The words were in Japanese. Perfect Japanese. And suddenly, the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Kenji stared at her. For a moment he forgot where he was. He forgot the desk clerk's dismissal, forgot the manager's judgment, forgot the 18 hours of travel and the 3 weeks of betrayal. All of it disappeared because this young woman, this waitress with tired eyes and flour on her apron, had just spoken to him in his own language, in his own country's respectful tone, and it felt like hearing his mother's voice after years of silence. You speak Japanese?" he asked, still in Japanese, his voice rough with disbelief. She smiled. It wasn't a professional smile like the ones plastered on everyone else's faces. It was real, warm, the kind of smile that reached the eyes. "Yes, sir. I lived in Tokyo for several years. I couldn't help but overhear. It sounded like you were having trouble with your reservation? Behind Kenji, someone cleared their throat impatiently. The desk clerk was watching with narrowed eyes. The manager had crossed his arms. But the young woman didn't seem to notice or care. She was focused entirely on Kenji, giving him the kind of attention he'd been denied for the past hour. I have reservation, Kenji said, still speaking Japanese because it was such a relief to use words that came naturally. But I cannot remember the name I used. My assistant made the booking, but I left in a hurry, and I think maybe she used a different name for privacy. I have email somewhere, but I cannot find it on my phone. The woman nodded, listening with complete attention. Then she turned to the desk clerk and said, in English with just a hint of an accent, "Excuse me, Rachel. This gentleman is Mr. Morita. He has a reservation, but there may have been a booking mix-up. May I use the computer to help search for it?" Rachel, the desk clerk, blinked. She looked from the waitress to Kenji, confusion and irritation fighting on her face. "Skylar, you're supposed to be in the cafe. This isn't your department." "I know," Skylar said, her voice calm and polite but somehow also firm. "But I speak Japanese, and I think I can help resolve this quickly. It'll only take a moment." The manager stepped forward, his professional mask slipping to show annoyance. "Miss Reed, I appreciate your initiative, but we have procedures." "The procedure is to help guests," Skylar interrupted gently. She smiled at him, that same warm, real smile, but there was steel underneath it now. "Right? That's what we're here for." For a second, the manager looked like he wanted to argue. Then he glanced around the lobby at the growing crowd of onlookers and forced a tight smile. "Fine. Make it quick." Skylar moved behind the desk, Rachel reluctantly stepping aside, and turned to Kenji. "Can you remember anything about the booking? A date, a credit card number, an email address?" Kenji's mind felt clearer now, less fogged by exhaustion and humiliation. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and started scrolling through emails. "My assistant's name is Yuki Tanaka. She would have made booking. Maybe under her name? Or..." He paused, remembering. "Maybe under T. Sato. Is my pen name. I sometimes use for privacy." Skylar's fingers moved across the keyboard. She typed, paused, typed again. The lobby had gone quiet enough that Kenji could hear the click of her nails on the keys. 10 seconds. 20. He held his breath. Then her face lit up. "Found it. Imperial Suite, 14 nights, starting today." She looked up at the manager, and her voice went very soft, very careful. "It's the top floor suite. The one that's usually reserved for VIPs." The manager's face went white. Then red. Then white again. He leaned over the desk to see the screen, and Kenji watched understanding dawn in his eyes. The Imperial Suite wasn't just expensive. It was the kind of expensive that meant someone important. Someone who mattered. Someone they should have recognized. "Mr. Sato," the manager said, his voice suddenly oily with respect. "I am so deeply sorry for the confusion. If you'll just give us a moment to prepare your room key." "It's ready," Skylar said, already printing something. "I can give him his keys right now." She looked at Kenji, switching back to Japanese. "I'm so sorry for the trouble, sir. Would you like help with your luggage?" Before Kenji could answer, two bellhops appeared as if summoned by magic, reaching for his worn suitcase. The same people who'd walked past him minutes ago. The same staff who'd acted like he didn't exist. Now they were tripping over each other to serve him. "No," Kenji said quietly, still in Japanese. "Thank you, but no." He looked at Skylar, really looked at her. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of face that suggested she smiled often but had also seen enough hardship to understand its weight. Her uniform was spotless despite the flour stain, her posture straight despite obvious exhaustion. And her eyes held something he hadn't seen in a long time, genuine kindness without expectation of reward. "How did you learn Japanese?" he asked. She glanced at the growing crowd around them, then back at Kenji. "It's a long story, sir. I wouldn't want to keep you." "Please," Kenji said. "I would like to know." Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded. My father was in the military. We lived in Tokyo from when I was 8 until I was 14. I went to a local school, made friends, learned the language. It was... She paused and her smile turned sad. It was the happiest time of my life. When we moved back to the States, I promised myself I'd go back someday. I want to be a translator. Maybe work for the embassy, or a company that does business with Japan. But university is expensive and... She shrugged. Right now, I'm working here, saving what I can. You're working in the cafe? Kenji asked. And the restaurant? Double shifts most days. She said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. It's good work. And sometimes I get to practice my Japanese when guests from Japan come through. Kenji felt something shift in his chest. Here was this young woman, working herself exhausted, dreaming of a future she could barely afford, and she'd stopped everything to help him. Not because she knew who he was. Not because she expected a reward. But because she'd heard him struggling and decided that mattered. He looked around the lobby. At the desk clerk who'd dismissed him. At the manager who'd suggested he try a motel. At the guests who'd laughed. At the staff who'd walked past like he was furniture. And he made a decision. May I ask your full name? He said to Skylar. Skylar Reed, she said, looking slightly confused. Kenji nodded slowly. Then he turned to the manager, switching to English, letting his voice carry across the marble floor. I need to tell you something. My real name is not Tiu Sato. The manager blinked. I'm sorry, sir. My real name, Kenji said clearly, is Kenji Morita. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he saw it, recognition dawning on the manager's face like a sunrise. The blood drained from his cheeks. Behind him, Rachel grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. One of the bellhops actually gasped. Kenji Morita. Owner of Morita International. Parent company of Summit Resort Properties. Owner of this hotel, and 63 others across the world. Sir, the manager breathed. You didn't... I'm so... Kenji held up a hand, and the man fell silent. I came here quietly because I wanted to see how my hotels treat guests when they think no one important is watching. He let that sink in, watching shame and fear spread across the manager's face. Now I know. The lobby was completely silent. Even the fountain seemed to have stopped gurgling. Kenji turned to Skylar, who looked stunned. Miss Reed, you showed me kindness when everyone else showed me nothing. You helped me when you had no reason to help, when it wasn't your job, when you gained nothing from it. This is rare. His voice cracked slightly. This is valuable. I just... Skylar started, then stopped. Anyone would have. No, Kenji said firmly. Not anyone. Not today. Only you. He turned back to the manager. His voice went cold, sharp, every word a blade. You're fired. Effective immediately. The desk clerk too. And I want the names of every staff member who walked past me, who ignored me, who treated me like I didn't matter. I will review their employment personally. The manager opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Rachel had tears streaming down her face. But sir, the manager finally managed. You suggested I try a motel, Kenji said softly. Because I looked poor. Because my English is not perfect. Because you decided in 30 seconds that I was not worth your time. Tibos, how many other guests have you treated this way? How many people have walked through these doors and been judged not by their humanity but by their appearance? No answer. The manager stared at his shoes. Kenji turned to Skylar again. Miss Reed, I am creating a new position. Guest Relations Cultural Liaison. Your job will be to ensure that every guest, regardless of appearance, language, or background, is treated with respect. The salary is $90,000 per year. Do you accept? Skylar's mouth fell open. What? I don't... 90,000? Plus benefits, Kenji said. And I will pay for your university education. Above it? Any program you choose. You want to be a translator? You will be the best translator. I will make sure of it. Tears spilled down Skylar's cheeks. She pressed her hands to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Kenji thought about his nephew's betrayal. About the 3 weeks of pain and doubt and wondering if kindness was weakness, if trust was foolishness. And here was this young woman, proving that goodness still existed. That some people still helped others simply because it was right? Because you greeted me in Japanese, he said quietly. One sentence. That's all it took. And it changed everything. He reached out and took her hand. Around them, the lobby stayed frozen, everyone watching this moment unfold like a movie they couldn't pause. In my country, Kenji said, we have a saying. One kind word can warm 3 winter months. Today, you gave me more than a kind word. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost. What? Skylar asked through her tears. Hope, Kenji said simply. He released her hand and turned to address the entire lobby, his voice ringing clear. Starting today, Summit Resort Properties will have a new policy. Every property, every country. We will judge guests by respect, not by appearance. Staff will be trained in cultural sensitivity. And anyone who fails to treat another human being with dignity will be removed immediately. He paused. This is not a request. This is law. Silence. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. One person. Then another. Then the whole lobby erupted in applause. Skylar was crying openly now, and Kenji found his own eyes wet. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected that punishing cruelty would feel so much like healing. Hadn't expected that one young woman's kindness would give him a reason to believe in his own judgment again. Come, he said to Skylar in Japanese. Help me to my room. I am very tired, and I have many calls to make. But first, I want to hear more about Tokyo. I want to hear about your dreams. I want to know everything. Skylar nodded, wiping her face. She came around the desk, picked up Kenji's worn suitcase, ignoring the bellhops, and walked beside him to the elevator. As the doors closed, Kenji caught one last glimpse of the lobby. The fired manager standing frozen. The guests whispering. The staff looking at each other with dawning understanding. And he smiled. A real smile. The first one in 3 weeks. Thank you, he said softly to Skylar. She looked up at him, her eyes still shining with tears. For what? For seeing me, Kenji said. When I was invisible. The elevator rose, carrying them up and away, toward the top floor and the imperial suite and a future that had just been rewritten by a simple greeting. By words in a language that meant home.